the wonderful former United States Senator and former president of the Heritage Foundation, and one of the leading conservatives in the country, Jim DeMint. Senator DeMint, how are you?
Matt, I am doing well. Thanks for having me today.
Oh, it's great. I want to make sure in the limited time we have that we get to one thing that you just signed on to that has been in the news over the last few years, something that our friend Mark Levin has pushed for many years, and that is the Convention of States project that is going across the nation. Talk about what it is that you want to accomplish and why you decided to throw your efforts behind this effort to create an Article 5 Convention of States.
Matt, I've found over the last few years that in order to make a difference, you have to work inside Washington as well as all around the country, and I'm going to continue to fight on both fronts. We'll be announcing in a couple of weeks a new organization that designed to support conservatives and unite the movement. But I also have seen that the real action is at the state level. And given where Washington is today, Matt, I have no belief that they will ever stop spending. No matter who's elected, I think they'll continue to spend until our country's bankrupt. And so this is a time that our founders envisioned as a possibility when they wrote Article 5, where they gave the states the ability to come together and propose amendments, such as amendments forcing the federal government to balance its budget, limit its taxation, to limit its jurisdiction over states, and even limit the terms of congressmen and senators and maybe judges. So I believe that in order to make a difference, we have to have an inside and outside game, a short game and a long game. I'll be fighting on the health care bill as well as the reform of our tax system, but I'll be working with the Convention of the States all around the country to encourage 34 states to call a convention to propose amendments that would limit the power and scope of the federal government.
Yeah, and I'm down in Austin, Texas, and I wrote a column about Convention of States in the Austin American Statesman where I write a biweekly column in January 2016. So this is something I've been following for a while. As you probably know, Senator DeMint, our governor, Greg Abbott, is a big supporter of this. He made it an emergency item in Texas during the legislative session, and it passed in the state of Texas. What is the current status of this effort? If I want to say there's only, is it 10 or 11 states that have now adopted this?
Well, there are 12 that have adopted the specific Convention of the States, Article 5 of legislation. For years, decades, in fact, states have proposed a convention, but they have not proposed the same subject matter or the same amendments, so they don't aggregate towards the 34 that we need to call a convention. But we have 12 states really just with an effort that's been going on for 4 years, primarily the last 2 years. 12 states have approved, including Texas, a call to convention with 3 specific areas of subject matter to be addressed by amendments. And we've got about 20 legislatures that will be considering it next year. So it's developing a lot of momentum. North Carolina came close this year, just a few votes short in the House last week. And hopefully we'll have 10 or 15 more states join the ranks next year. And our goal is within 2 years to have 34 states to call a convention to propose amendments in 3 specific subject areas.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if you just mentioned this and I just totally missed it. I think I heard you say a couple of them, but what are those 3 areas?
It's first of all, it's fiscal restraint, which would be things like balancing the budget, limit taxation and spending.
Right.
The second would be to limit the authority, the jurisdiction of the federal government over the states.
Right.
Things like stopping unfunded mandates or regulations on the states, or redefining the interstate commerce clause to actually deal with interstate commerce and not all commerce. The third is to limit the terms of federal officials, and that would be congressmen, senators, and judges.
Interesting. There's a lot in each of those areas. So in terms of the status, I mean, you said that there's 12 states now. You think there's a chance that maybe another 20 come into session next year. That could get you close to 30, I guess 32 if you got all of them. You could need to get to 34. So, like you said, another couple years, maybe 3 years, you can finally get to that 34. Let's say you get to 34. What is the process once you get there?
The state legislatures are in control of this, and they will send, really Congress doesn't have to be involved except to designate the place where the meeting is. They're required by law to do that. And so there would be a convention, just as the Convention of the States held a simulated convention last year, following all the procedures and protocols of state meetings for well over 100 years. And it went just as planned. States sent different numbers of delegates, but every state gets one vote. Even the states that don't call for a convention can send delegates, and they have one vote. And this idea, Matt, that I hear that there's going to be a runaway convention is really not possible if you understand Article 5. Now, I know we've got a runaway Congress and we've got runaway courts, but the chance of 34 states calling a convention around a subject matter that would take away anyone's rights, I mean, it's inconceivable. And then for 38 states to have to ratify that, I have a lot of confidence and feel a lot of security in states coming together to propose these amendments. So the convention will recommend, actually suggest amendments to the states. This convention has no authority to change the Constitution, but it's really an amendments convention that they send these amendments to the states for ratification, and 38 states would have to ratify these amendments. So it's possible the convention could recommend 6 or 8 amendments, and that 38 states ratify only 2 or 3. It really just depends. But we have seen that we're much more effective dealing with subject matter before the convention, and then at the convention let the delegates debate how to write the amendments to limit the jurisdiction of the states or whatever the subject matter is, and then come to an agreement, and then those would go to the states. So this, again, the founders debated this. There's a record of the debate, and they knew if the federal government ever got out of control that it would not propose amendments or laws that would restrain itself. So they gave the states an emergency brake, a kind of a break glass, pull lever type moment, which really should have happened a decade ago, given the level of debt we have and dysfunction we have in Washington. So we're calling on the states to exercise their constitutional responsibility. At the same time, as I've said before, and I continue to stress, we cannot give up on Washington. We've got to continue to elect and support conservatives to do everything we can to push the country in the right direction.
Yeah, the charge that opponents often make that you referenced, that you could have a, quote, runaway convention is certainly one that has gotten some attention. And I know that our governor in Texas was quoted as saying, if we don't have 13 states that can block a bad idea, we are in deeper trouble than we think. I presume you would agree with that. I mean, if they wanted to, just do something really dramatic, abortion on demand, anytime, anywhere, some type of cap and trade system on all the states. I mean, you can't envision a scenario where 13 states don't block something like that, right?
No, but I can envision one federal judge taking some of our rights away, or
right.
The Supreme Court taking First Amendment or Second Amendment rights or redefining them. They could, with a whim, with just a few people, they've taken away our rights, and Congress has imposed unfunded mandates on states. The EPA has put all these regulations on states and killed jobs. But like you said, I cannot imagine any bad idea that 13 states would not easily step up and kill right away. So, and I could name a lot of them, but you're not going to have 34 states call for a convention around limited subjects and then turn around and ratify amendments that have nothing to do with that. It's just not going to happen. The legislatures that are doing this are the ones I think I'm counting on to help us save our country.
Sure, and so I want to broaden this out just for a minute, because you've referenced fiscal restraint and spending at the national level twice now, and you may not remember this, but you and I first got to know each other during the cut cap balance effort with Colin Hanna back in whatever that was, right. 2009, 2010, and so I know that, and I think most conservatives know, you're someone that has been extremely focused on federal spending for a very long time. I had your former colleague, Tom Coburn, on this podcast a few months ago, and he has just an unbelievable sense of pessimism about the fiscal trajectory of the future of the country, almost to the point where it's bordering on hopelessness. Now, as you know, he is very much in favor of this Convention of States, Article 5 Convention of States as well. How bad is it from your perspective of the trajectory that we're on, and what can we do? Short of this, is there anything that can be done in Washington, or have you basically given up on Washington reforming itself?
Oh, I've formed a new organization in Washington to support conservatives because we've got to do everything like the cut, cap, and balance fight. We didn't get what we wanted out of that fight, but we ended up with basically a budget act that the sequester, and it was messy. It would have been a lot nicer to do the cut, cap, and balance that we proposed. Right. But we've got to keep that fight going, to, if nothing else, to buy some time for the ratification process. But the Congress can do things such as some variation of tax reform. It won't be what I want. They could repeal Obamacare. If they can't do that, they can do things maybe to keep the private insurance market alive. So I'm not pessimistic. If once you become pessimistic, you really shouldn't be in the fight. I'm optimistic we can do things to make things better in Washington, but I don't think the structure allows anymore to limit spending and debt. Because as it's set up now, Matt, as you know, we cannot get the money we need to defend our country without at the same time having to give Democrats an equal amount for domestic spending. So what we've got is this vicious cycle upward as far as increase in spending. But conservatives have proven that they can get out and fight and slow things down. They can get some limits in spending, and I think we can make them more effective. But we have to realize, as Tom Coburn and I and many others have, that eventually the federal government's going to spin us into some form of economic crisis. And frankly, we don't know if that's next week or next year or 5 years from now. The fact that we're the reserve currency has given us a buffer. But the only reason we're not already in trouble at our debt level is that the rest of the world is such a basket case, and that won't always be true. So we have to continue to do everything we can, and that's why I'm fighting on two fronts. I'm going to continue to do everything I can in D.C., but the Convention of the States is probably the only way that we could possibly stop the reckless spending and debt that's happening now in Washington.
How do you evaluate the Trump administration and now about 6 months into this new administration? I'm sure there are, some things you might disagree with, but to a great extent, are you generally encouraged by what they're doing? How do you think he's doing?
I think he's doing everything he could or can to keep his campaign promises. He's had a hard time. Obviously, the media's camped out on the White House lawn. It's like he and his staff are in a box canyon. They're firing at him every day. I think they've done a great job with a lot of rollback of regulations, the things that he can control within his administration. He's actually done a lot that's unreported, and it's clearly helping the economy. Mm-hmm. The Congress needs to be of more help. We know what they should have done the first week of his presidency is put through a repeal of Obamacare, create some momentum, change the subject to how we're going to replace it with something better. Tax reform, it needs to be moving a lot quicker. So I feel good about Trump. I know they're going to make it almost impossible for him to succeed. But my working with him, I've been pleased that his real commitment is to keep the promises he made when he campaigned.
Yeah, and I know at Heritage you deepened and improved relations there quite a bit with the Trump administration. I know that's paid dividends. You mentioned health care. What level of confidence do you have right now? Because what's really interesting, Senator, as you probably saw, is there was a strategy in the early months, even among some in Senate leadership, to that they thought the Democrats would be willing in a second phase, perhaps, to work on a replacement together once it had been repealed. They obviously changed strategic directions, and now they're trying to work through reconciliation, which does have some limitations. Do you have any confidence at this point that they're ultimately going to be able to do something helpful on health care?
Helpful maybe, but I think they may have lost their opportunity for a real repeal. I mean, I talked to Republican leadership in the House and the Senate right before the swearing in, and the plan was to put a 2015 bill back through the House and the Senate immediately that repealed most of Obamacare. It didn't get all of the regulations because it was had to be done with reconciliation, which I still think could be done with reconciliation. Yeah. But like you said, for some reason they changed, and now they've offered what is essentially Obamacare with some tweaks. It's got the subsidies, it's got the regulations, it's got Medicaid expansion. So I'm somewhat optimistic that they may do some things to improve the situation. What we're hoping for is something like the amendment Ted Cruz has proposed that would allow Obamacare to continue, but also allow states the ability to create a private insurance market that works, that creates more choices and at lower prices. So I'm not sure he has support from the leadership in the Senate, but that's the kind of thing that I'm hoping for right now. It appears that there are too many Republicans who don't really want to repeal Obamacare. I'm hoping they'll at least allow something like the Cruz Amendment to keep an alternative going, because if we keep Obamacare like it is, we're going to have a single-payer government health care system within a few years, and that's just a terrible defeat for freedom in America.
Last question as we wrap up here. I'm curious, given your role in the conservative movement over the last decade as one of the absolute most respected national leaders, Senator DeMint, what do you honestly think is the state of the movement today? Is it fractured? Is it united mostly behind Trump? Is it healthy? What do you think needs to happen to strengthen the conservative movement and make it more effective going forward?
Well, that's a great question. The conservative movement is still out there waiting. And what I hear when I go around the country is they say, thanks for fighting, what can I do? And many of them will say, I'm praying for you. But people want to know what they can do, and that's why this Convention of States is so important. It's a clear focus, it's constitutional, it's doable, and unlike the Tea Party, which I was very much a part of, the whole Tea Party idea was to elect the right people. But what we've realized is we don't have a personnel problem in Congress. We have a structural problem that makes it impossible to actually accomplish what we run on as conservatives. So states are going to have to play a role in this, but the movement is still there, and they're waiting for orders and good leadership. And hopefully me, Senator Coburn, and a number of others who are working at the state level can help conservatives see that this is a way. The Convention of the States, the Article 5 Convention of the States, is a way to focus their energy and actually make a difference.
Sign the petition at cosaction.com and get as many of your friends and family to do the same. With your full address, your state legislators will know that you really are their constituents in their district. Our success depends on you, so we're inviting you to be part of history. Let's invoke the constitutional solution that's as big as the problem.